Deputy Trevor Pittman, along with panel members, Deputy Roy Laharissier and former Deputy Daniel Wimberley, have just produced what a lot of us think is a damning and scathing report, particularly on Channel Television and the Jersey Evening Post, of the way they reported the historic child abuse expenditure. It was damning, it was scathing. A lot of us believe now, and there's recommendations in this report by Deputy Pittman and others that there should be a scrutiny panel set up to look at what the relationship with the media and the government, and as there is in England. I think it's sport, media and culture. Should we have something like that here?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think media is certainly an area which needs valid scrutiny, and it could fall under probably the ESC committee. You know, Education Home Affairs would probably be the logical place to slot that in. But it needs people on that committee who are going to be committed and impartial, reasonably, you know, as impartial as anybody can be, to making sure that works. But I think, again, that's going to be of limited use in reality, because in Jersey we know that, I certainly believe that there is a too cosy relationship between the media and the government. And sometimes that's not necessarily because there's a philosophical agreement between the media and the state in terms of idea. It's purely because it's easy to actually be drip-fed your press releases, so you get a press release from the Chief Minister's Department, from the Treasury, wherever, and that's the news. It saves anybody having to do any work. And also, of course, let's not forget that the JEP receive their money from two main sources. One of them is the government. I think it's something like,
I think it's about 277,000.
I was going to say 250, but it varies. I think it's 277, wasn't it? That's money that the taxpayer is paying to the JEP. And then you've also got private commercial advertising from many of the big businesses. So their key objective is not to piss off, if I can say that, any of their key clients. They don't want to alienate their clients. So that's questionable. There's clearly going to be some kind of
Just to finish on, I put this question to Deputy Trevor Pittman. Can you name me one story from any of our media, Channel Television, Jersey Evening Post, BBC Radio Jersey, any story where any investigative journalism has been used? You can say, yeah, that was a good story. That was a good bit of investigative journalism. In a word.
I think that I probably could, if I'm going to be fair. I think that Channel Television have done pieces in the past on the condition of social housing, which clearly, if we were living in a completely controlled media, they wouldn't have done. I mean, that embarrassed the housing department. I think at the weekend we saw a piece about an undercover reporter taking a piece of jewellery along to. So I think, clearly there will be instances, and I think it's important that we say we shouldn't necessarily tar all journalists. There are clearly talented journalist reporters out there who, if they were left to their own devices, could hopefully come up with more of this real investigative journalism. But when it comes to the fundamentals, about do we have democracy in Jersey, what things are there that we could be doing to promote a better government, a lot of the time the questions aren't asked, they're completely reactive. So
there are people they're given, if they're given a press release, no matter how absurd it is, 65 children's teeth fell through a gap in a floorboard, they would just repeat that, wouldn't they? They wouldn't even question. They have repeated it.
That's it. When it's really important stuff, and you have this whole nonsense that we saw with the coconut at Ola Garin, and as soon as somebody...
coconut that contained 1.6% collagen.
Exactly, but that's what everyone remembers now. It wasn't skull, it was coconut, but as soon as someone says actually it wasn't coconut, it had collagen in it, so it suggests that was human. We don't hear anything about that coconut now from the media. They didn't.
Well, every time they mention Lenny Harper's name, almost every time they mention the coconut, because they try to associate his name with that. But the fact or the evidence does show us that it was a piece of child's skull. That's where the fact and evidence take us, but our media don't rely on it. Now, so in a word, would you say do you think we've got a free press here, or we've got state media?
I think what we've got is, as I said earlier, we've got a managed media, and I think we've got a lazy media. I think the danger when you become lazy is that you become too cosy with the establishment, whatever that establishment might be. And I think that
so let's say we've got state media. You're saying, well, we've got a media that's too cosy with our state.
I think that's probably a fair way to put it. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say we've got state media. I think, you know, we don't live in a communist country. We clearly do have a theoretical free press, free media, and that they can say what they want. But I think that there are various reasons, including the fact that there's no competition. We know what the dangers are with no competition and monopolies in any kind of sector. There's an inherent danger that they end up not doing their job and not being fit for purpose. And I think what we have in terms of Jersey's traditional media in Jersey is that time and time again it is letting the public down because it's not giving us the full facts and the full stories about what's going on, not just in our government but in our island in general.
So the bloggers, where do we fit in, the bloggers? Where do you see our place?
I think there's definitely a place for bloggers, and I think, and what we are seeing, and hopefully we'll continue to see, is that the bloggers will up their game. I think sometimes the bloggers actually need to be, and are, leading by example, both in terms of the content of their stories. They've developed specialist areas where they actually know more than a lot of politicians. They know more than a lot of their counterparts in the mainstream media. So I think that's the way forward, and you know, people increasingly will know that they can turn to blogs for specialists and just general news information. Of course, sometimes blog is going to be opinion, that's fine, but there's an expectation when you read a blog, you take things with a pinch of salt, and that's not, you know, that's the way it should be. But there should also be that same expectation when you pick up a newspaper, that you also realise its opinion and it's subject to you know, bias. The trouble is, people in general, when they pick up the Jersey newspaper or when they switch on the Jersey television, they take that as somehow being more authoritative than any other piece of information. And I think younger generation probably are more sceptical, quite rightly, because they're used to having to deal with lots of different types of information and scrutinising that. I think the older generation, perhaps, this isn't a generalisation, but in general, perhaps haven't lived in an area where they need to discriminate so much about what's being told to them. So I think all I can say, perhaps the thought to leave your bloggers with, is that actually, whatever you're reading, just ask some questions like, is this correct? Does this make sense? And who are the people that are writing this associated with? You know, who are the people at the JUP? Who are they associated with historically or currently? And I think that will perhaps change the way you think about what you're reading.